In this video we're going to talk about the main players in industrial relations. We're going to look at the different parties that are involved in employee relations. As we'll see, this will mostly hinge around the workers, the employees, their trade unions or their representatives, and on the other side management. But there are others involved, for example the government. So we'll talk about these throughout the course of this session. Now, employee relations is a system comprising of relationships between employees and employers. Relationships are managed through the means of conflict and cooperation. So there are two sides, two basic sides if you like. There's the employees on the one side. The employees want better working conditions, better remuneration, and a voice perhaps within the organisation, or certainly more recognition within the organisation. But on the other side there's the employers who perhaps want to control pay, control the wage bill, and also want to save on costs and save on expenditures in the organisation, which may mean the working conditions are not what they should be. So we have two sides, and they are in conflict to some extent. One side works with their labour in order to generate output for the organisation, and in return expects good treatment, expects good remuneration and good working conditions. On the other side, the management, who expect the employees to work hard, to have good quality work, to be diligent and work safely and so on, but also to do it on terms that are, in a sense, cheap, that are reasonable, that are not excessive. I'm using a lot of near synonyms to describe this, but the management want to save because they're in business to make a profit. So the ingredients for conflict are present, and the conflict, should it arise, will manifest itself through disputes, non-cooperation with the management, perhaps a strike. So the ingredients for disputes are always present. Employee relations is based on harmonious relations between employees and their representatives and the employers, working together in accordance with the government. So the picture becomes slightly more complex. The government sets out a framework within which the employees must deal with the management, but also sets out terms in which the management must deal with the employees. It's a two-way street. But good employee relationships is when it's harmonious, when both sides agree and work may proceed. Sometimes issues will arise for all sorts of reasons. It could be dissatisfaction over salaries or wages. It could be dissatisfaction over working conditions. But it could also be an issue that management is unhappy about the quality of the output from the employees, which may raise issues. So the ingredients for conflict is ever present, as I said earlier, but it must all occur within the framework that's set out by the government. Maintenance of relationships create an environment where economic efficiency can be achieved. Employees will be motivated, productive and loyal. So if it is harmonious, then all the benefits will flow from that. Benefits like higher productivity, more sustained output, more continuity in employment, there's more loyalty on the part of the employees. It's a good working relationship. So if employee relations is effective, if there is harmonious working relationships, there are a lot of benefits for either side. Management get more continuous production, perhaps better quality production, perhaps higher productivity. The employees get more security of employment and better working conditions, and but also there's a sense of working together. In the absence of the harmonious relationships, or the possibility of that, then disputes can arise. And as I said earlier, a couple of times now, disputes are ever present. The possibility for a dispute is ever present, because the employees will be keen to see their positions advanced. They will like to see improvements in their salaries and wages. They'd like to see improvements in the working conditions. Management, on the other hand, would like to see a bigger return on their investments. So, as I said, conflict is, or the potential for conflict, is ever present. So we have the employee relationship structure. This is a set of rules set out by the government within which both sides in industry must deal. And on the one side you have the employees, the employers and the government. And all of them feed into the way in which employee relationships are conducted within an organisation. The employees want it to be conducted in a certain way, the employers have their voice, and the government sets out statutory requirements. For example, if a trade union is involved, then before a strike can be called, there are preconditions that must be met. They must be met because of legal requirements that the government have set out. So it's not just possible to call a strike. The strike must be considered in the context of what is legally permissible. We also have the inputs of employers' associations who make recommendations and can become involved in employee relationships within an organisation. An employee association, I should say, could be the Institute of Directors or the Chamber of Commerce or a trade association associated with that particular product that's made. Perhaps other companies who make similar products have come together and formed an organisation. And they can make recommendations and suggestions. They don't get directly involved, but they could make suggestions or offer advice. The trade unions and the wider trade union movement could become involved through recommendations and advice, perhaps to the local trade union officials within the company. And of course, courts and tribunals may be used, because the government will want to see how its legislation is working and want to see that it is upheld. So any violation of the government regulations would go to courts and tribunals. So if we take the diagram we've got here, we go across the top, we have the employees and we have employers' associations. The employees could link to the trade unions, the second one down. The employers could link to the employers' associations, and the government, of course, would link to the courts. So these are the various players in the employee relationships setting. We have employees, employers, and the government. Employee relations is dependent on the main players such as the employees, the employers and the managers, the organisation itself, the organisation in the sense of the corporate strategy that's set out within the organisation, the pressures from the shareholders to get certain returns on capital, or the competitive nature of the business, the fact that the business has to spend a lot perhaps on innovation and change, and the more change there is within the organisation, the more potential there is for industrial disputes. There's more situations where the system is unsettled and the employees will want to know how the changes are going to affect them and what they can do about this. So the organisation will have pressures and inputs. The trade unions will have a say in what they think is fair and right, and they will side, of course, with the employees and their membership, but they will also guide the membership towards what can be achieved, and will look reasonably at what is on offer and the context in which the offer is made. Is the organisation fighting for survival? Because if it is, the offer will not be very much. So there has to be reasonable behaviour. The main players have a direct or indirect role on employee relations. The main players are the ones that constitute employee relations. So to say that they have a direct or indirect role is almost meaningless. Employee relations is the impact of employees, employers, trade unions, the government, and so on. Employees play a key role in employee relations. They contribute and influence the aims and goals of the organisation. When the company is drawing up its corporate strategy and its various plans, perhaps functional plans, it must incorporate what is likely to be accepted or not accepted by the employees, and it must find ways to accommodate the requirements of the employees. So it can't operate in a vacuum. So the employees must be factored in to any planning scenario that's designed by management. The employees can contribute in decision making, and they are also a major driving force behind the organisation. And of course they play a major role in the success of the organisation. It's the employees who make the products or make the services or produce the services that are sold, and therefore they need to be considered when changes are considered or when the organisation is drawing up plans. So they are the major driving force of the organisation. They want, of course, improved working conditions, again as I said earlier, better pay and career prospects. They work with management to find solutions, and they make suggestions. They cooperate. They want to see the organisation successful, because if the organisation is successful, there is more chance that they will receive benefits, extra benefits. And they'll also feel a sense of pride for working for a company that has a good reputation in the marketplace and is well known. They can, of course, join trade unions and work alongside them to ensure that the organisation follow correct procedures and policies in employee welfare. Trade unions have an excellent knowledge of good practice. They know what other organisations are doing. They facilitate the flow of information about employee relations and about what's happening in different organisations. So the trade unions can give expert opinion to the employees as to whether what's on offer from the organisation is good or not so good, or how it matches up against other organisations. The employees must enjoy their job and be motivated. If they are, this increases productivity. And the organisations must try to ensure that the employees are happy and satisfied with their jobs. If the workforce are disgruntled, if they're annoyed about certain things, or there's something that's annoying within the organisation, some proposal perhaps, or some way of working, or some change that's been implemented, perhaps been implemented without consultation, the employees may be upset about this, and if the employees are upset, they may not cooperate. Productivity may fall off. Some people may leave the organisation. There might also be high absenteeism. Generally speaking, if the employees are not happy, then productivity will be affected. Trade unions are involved in factors such as change in working patterns or introduction of new machinery that may impact on job security. It's all very well saying that modern technology is highly productive and leads to increased output and cost savings. But on the other side of that coin is the fact that people may lose their jobs. Their work may be replaced by the introduction of robotics or advanced computer-aided manufacturing systems, and progressively the workforce are being marginalized. They are diminishing in terms of number and in terms of status. They're not able to work as fast as the machines. They haven't got the same precision or the same consistency. So therefore they will be replaced. And this can affect morale. Clearly the trade unions will be aware of this and will try to compensate for it and negotiate with management and try to regulate the introduction of these technologies. So it's done in a way which accommodates the needs of the workforce. Perhaps the workforce are getting older and some are considering retiring. Well, that's better that they'll leave the organisation than be made redundant because of more productive machinery. So there are issues that need to be considered. Managers and employers have an influence over employee relations. An employer has the authority to take and make final decisions in an organisation. Employees can either adhere or protest against the decisions. So we have got a very split view of the organisation. On the one side, we have management who can make decisions and can force through the decisions. They own the premises, they own the buildings, they own the machines, they own the business. So they can make decisions and force through what they want. But there lies the problem. The employees may not want this, and management find it difficult to force it through because the employees will not cooperate. It could lead to disputes and strikes and walkouts, and so the two sides are locked into a system where they need to cooperate for the success of the business and for the future success of the business. They need to cooperate. Employers have rights regarding their workforce. They have the right to make recruitment decisions. Nobody tells the workforce who to recruit, the management who to recruit. Management make the decision based on the characteristics of the applicant and the suitability of the applicant and so on. They've also got rights to negotiate over employee contracts and work conditions. So the employers can set out the framework within which work will take place and within which employee relations will be conducted. Managers have the right to make decisions in the best interest of the organisation. For example, to close shops or stores, to relocate or to merge with other companies, the introduction of new machinery and technology. So the managers have the right to look to the interest of the organisation, to maintain the organisation. But many of these decisions will impact on the workers, on the employees, and the employees may not be happy about closures of certain plants or other factories or stores or shops or whatever it is that's affected. It'll mean redundancies amongst some of their colleagues. Relocation of the plant from one part of the city or the town to another, or even from one region in the country to a different region, that may seriously upset the workers who now have to travel further perhaps, or have more inconvenience in getting to work. So there are issues about the the rights of the managers and the way the managers enforce their rights, the rights to look after the business, which is a legitimate right, but it does have impacts on the employees. Employee relations ensures that employers are following the correct procedures when associating with employees. The whole arrangement of meeting and dealing with each other should be set out and should be clearly understood. What's permissible and what's not permissible, what should be discussed and not discussed, and what should be, how should the process be conducted. There should be some framework within which it takes place. Employee relations in the form of trade unions are in place to protect and guide both employers and employees. The trade unions can be helpful to the employers because the employers are dealing with one organisation. They're not dealing with all the workforce individually. So it's much more efficient to deal with one. So it's in the interest of the organisation to have the trade union, but the trade union must understand the organisation's requirements. And it's trying to find out an accommodation between the two. That's the trick. To try and work out what each one requires and try to find middle ground to resolve the issue. Employers play a key role in employee relations. They're responsible for the maintenance of the employer and employee relationships. So the employers, generally speaking, are the ones who call the meetings. The employers are the ones who come up with the initiatives, comes up with the plans, comes up with the ideas to introduce new machinery or change the working week or change the location of the business. So it's the employers who are coming up with the ideas, and they must do this recognizing that the employees will look at these to see if it's to their advantage or not, and what are the implications if it's not. Will there be a dispute, and how will the dispute be dealt with? Employers must ensure that employees are motivated at work and enjoy their job. So the employers must find a way of accommodating the requirements of the employees. The employees spend a large part of their lives in the company, and they should find it a pleasant experience. It should not be onerous, hard work, continuous hard work. They should have rest periods, they should have proper toilet facilities and a place to have a drink of water or a cup of coffee, and they should be able to mix with their colleagues. They should be able to work in an atmosphere where they feel that they have this facility. And if they do, they will work harder. They will apply themselves more, perhaps, and be more productive. The government plays a role in employee relations. They influence employee relations through the regulation of laws, legislations and agreements. The governments set out the framework. They say what's permissible, what's not permissible. For example, in the conduct of a strike, what can the trade unions do and not do? But also, what's the obligations on the employers? The employers must surely meet some obligations as well to try and accommodate and to deal with the employees and their requests. So the government sets out the framework within which it all happens. All the employee relationships and their issues and their concerns on both sides, all of these take place within this framework set out by the government. The government is a large sector with different government departments, each influencing employment relations outcomes. When we think of the government in the UK, there are many departments: the Justice Department, the department dealing with industry, and commerce, and all the departments just about have some impact on employee relations. Even the health department will have considerations about employee relations and trying to ensure that the employees within the health sector are motivated, that they are properly remunerated and respected for their contributions and so on. So all the departments of government just about have some sort of influence on employee relations. And it's important that the government give good example to the private sector in the conduct of employee relations. So the arguments set out by the trade unions must be countered logically by the arguments set out by management, which in turn will be countered again logically by the trade unions, to and fro, until finally a solution is found, an accommodation is found. The government is influenced by political changes, and legislation is passed in accordance with these changes. This has the influence on management and employee relations. We have, within the political system, we have governments who are, let's say, very pro the trade union movement and will want to initiate laws that support the trade unions. Then again, we'll have governments who are perhaps not so pro the trade unions or more pro business and will want to institute laws that are more pro business. These are political opinions and political backdrops upon which decisions are made. Good laws really should accommodate both. There should be a forum for both parties to discuss and hopefully agree on what the framework should be, and for the government to approve that and to legislate for it. If a government is just simply putting forward views because it meets their political agenda, then that could lead to conflict. One side of industry will be perhaps alienated and they will take industrial action perhaps. The aim of government intervention in employment relations is to maintain economic and political stability. The goal is to achieve high levels of employment. That's what the government is trying to do. It's trying to maintain economic stability. It's trying to maintain political stability. That's seen as important. The country must move from one time period to the next in a stable environment where people have some surety about their working conditions, the future of the economy, the future of their pensions, their savings. People are working for these reasons and they want some sort of security. So the government will intervene in employee relations to maintain economic and political stability. The government can't allow the country to degenerate into chaos. Now this could be brought about by either sides of industry simply adopting a very truculent attitude towards the other side, adopting a very aggressive attitude towards the other side. It could be that let's say the trade unions are taken over by people who have not got the interest of the workers at heart but have got a political agenda at heart. Or it could be that the management are influenced by some, say, political thinker or some very persuasive individual who is very anti-trade union. One way or the other, it can be quite a disaster for the country. Output can be lost. The whole economic base of the country can be threatened. So it's important for the government to try and engineer, find a route through all of this to bring about stability, economic stability and political stability, and trying to find ways of bringing about higher levels of employment. Generally speaking, trade unions specialise in their own industries. We have different trade unions for different industries. We have train drivers trade unions, we have health workers trade unions, we have school teachers trade unions. So they tend to specialise in their own type of area. We also have, of course, general trade unions that simply take in anyone, because sometimes people don't fit into categories very simply or very easily. So we have general trade unions as well. There are member associations that represent workers' interest in employment relations. So the trade unions are made up from their members, and they speak on behalf of their members in terms of their involvement in employee relations. So they deal with the management, and insofar as they deal with management, they're representing all of their members. They're speaking on behalf of all of their members. That gives them considerable power. But it's also efficient, as I said much earlier, for management to deal with the trade unions, because they're dealing with only one group of people, one small set of people, perhaps just one individual, the trade union representative. And in that sense, it's easier to try and find solutions. If all the individual workers within the workplace were to see management with their own set of requirements, it would be extremely difficult to find an accommodation. Unions ensure that employees are treated fairly in employment. They receive better pay and working conditions. That's the idea behind the trade unions. It's to promote the interest of the workers. At the time of the Industrial Revolution in the UK, there were no trade unions. Now this meant that the employers were very powerful. There was no social security system, no unemployment benefit if people were not working. So people had to work. They had to work under the conditions set out by the employers. And this was felt to be very unfair. And the working conditions were awful. There was low pay and very harsh working conditions. The logic is that if all the workers can come together, if they could combine and speak with one voice, then that was a balance for the employer. The two sides were balanced in negotiations. Trade unions were seen as a balancing force. There was almost an equilibrium between the two sides. In fact, the whole development of the trade union movement in the UK was hard. There were lots of disputes, there was violence, there was issues with the government and changing laws and lockouts, and it was a very tough period of development. Then it was felt that the trade unions had got power with the management, so there was a sort of equilibrium, a balance between the two, and they could negotiate as equals, and that was felt to be fair, because fair solutions would come out of that. There'd be no, in a sense, bullying by one side because they were more powerful than the other. This reached a peak around into the 1960s or 70s. But then it was felt that the trade unions got too powerful. And now they've fallen out of favour to some extent. And membership of trade unions have been in decline for many years. So it may be the case that the imbalance will re-emerge. We have to wait and see. The trade unions offer opportunities for collective bargaining. Employees have power to negotiate with their employers through the help of the trade unions. So the trade unions do give a voice for the employees. They give them a focus and enable them to deal with the employers on more equal terms. employers have the authority to make decisions regarding the best interest of the organisation and its shareholders. Trade unions allow employees to protest and voice their concerns. So we have the two sides. The employers looking after the shareholders, looking after the best interest of the organisation, and the unions on the other hand speaking up for the employees and enabling the employees to protest and voice their concerns. Employees have the right to collective bargaining, to organise strikes and boycotts in order for employers to hear their proposals. After all, in a democracy, it's not right to force people to work. If people wish to withhold their labour, that must be a basic human right. If they don't want to go to work, then they should not be forced. If people are upset about the conditions or the pay within their organisation, we can't force them to work. If the management increase the pay offer or improve the working conditions, the employees may be attracted back into work. And for this reason, the right to work and the right to withhold their labour is seen as an important right within the legal system. These are a few of the ideas about the main players in the employee relations setting. As I said, it really bubbles down to two, to the employees and the employers. But there are others, the government, who set the framework. There may be the trade unions who influence the types of negotiations and the outcomes and can organise disputes, organise action, I should say, related to disputes, if that's required. It could be employers' associations are advising the management about the way forward, and that can lead to issues and disputes as well. So there are, if you like, peripheral players, perhaps the trade unions and management organisations and advisors and consultants. These could be in a sense seen as peripheral. The main players in this scenario are the employees on the one hand and the management on the other. That's all we're going to deal with in this session, so let's leave it at that and let's just say thank you for watching.